you don't know me, my name is Carolyn Bach. I'm the president of the St. Genevieve Art Guild. And thank you all for coming here. This is the St. Genevieve Art Center in our museum. If you don't already know, we hope you'll take time to look around at some of the art while you're here. We're very proud to be in this space. The building is owned by the county, and we are renting it from the county. And thankfully, the county saw the value of having an art center in St. Genevieve. So, very good. I wanted to introduce tonight Bob Mueller. Bob is a friend of the Guild. I always introduce Bob as our local historian, but I also need to add that Bob is a noted author. He's a genealogist, a reenactor, and a tour guide, among other things. And he's a very active man. He's on the executive board of the State Historic Society. And he continues to be involved in our local historical society, the Foundation for Restoration of St. Genevieve. And we're very pleased that his historical interests include art history, which is what he's going to talk to us about tonight. So I'm very pleased to introduce Bob Mueller.
Thank you, Carolyn. This is a good crowd. I'm really pleased that you invited me here. I was actually doing some research on St. Genevieve marble, of all things. That's a new lecture that I'm working on. But I was getting into this many years ago, and I knew that we had some St. Genevieve marble in the St. Genevieve post office. So I walked in the post office, and I'm admiring the marble, and I look up, and I see on the wall this beautiful painting of the La Guillenée. And that kind of got me started thinking about this post office mural. It's what I call the 24/7 free public art gallery in the United States. You can go all over all the states, go into post offices, and see wonderful art. So, most people think this was a WPA project, this art in the post offices. It was not. So there were several art-related programs that occurred during when they were trying the New Deal coming out of the Depression. The first was the PWAP, or the Public Works Arts Project. 10,000 American artists were out of work in 1933. So they wanted to recognize that the artist, like the laborer, capitalist, and office worker, eats, drinks, and has a family and pays rent. I think some of you must know about that too, thus contradicting the old superstition that the painter and the sculptor lives in attics and exists on inspiration. That was Edward Bruce that started this program. 3,749 artists created 15,633 works of art, including 700 murals, 7,000 easel paintings and watercolors, and more than 2,500 works of graphic art. And these embellished non-federal buildings, parks, county buildings, town buildings. So that went on for a while, and then the second program that came along was called TRAP. 90% of these artists had to be on relief rolls. At that time, it probably wasn't too hard to find that many of them. It was only an $875,000 grant from the Treasury Department, and it employed 356 artists at its peak. They too created murals, 89 of them, 65 sculptures, and 10,000 easel works. So 356 artists, divide that into 10,000, that's a lot of paintings per person. I've shown this. I've got to learn that when we do these things on television screens, big fonts, fewer words. But these are some of the kinds of things that happened. Some of these are in Berkeley, California. Yeah. Some were paintings, some were murals inside of buildings. Then there was a third program called the WPA Administration Project, which is what we always think about this as being. It employed 5,300 visual artists and related professionals, and they painted 2,500 murals in hospitals, schools, and other public places. The easel painting division produced nearly 108,000 paintings. you wonder where all of these paintings are. So the sculpture division produced 18,000 pieces. They compiled a 22,000 plate index of American in furnishings and artifacts and staffed 100 art centers in 22 states. It was a big program, and we do have some records of WPA in Missouri. Each of these little persons there represent 100 artists that were employed. Some 49% in fine arts, 29% in practical arts, 16% in education. They wrote a lot of things. We actually have some stuff about St. Genevieve in the WPA records. They did posters. That one on the right is a painting that now hangs in the Jockey Board House. It was donated to us. It was believed to be a WPA painting of the old Pratt warehouse on the right and the Jockey Board House on the left. So let's get to the heart of the post office murals. They were created, it was called the Treasury Section of Painting and Sculptures, aka the Treasury Section of Fine Arts. And the Treasury Department was responsible for outfitting federal buildings with artwork. And a guy named George Biddle, who was a muralist and had done some work in those prior programs on murals, suggested this. And he did this based on the Diego Rivera 1920 Mexican mural program. The stated purpose was to secure for the government the best art which this country is capable of producing, with merit as the only test. The program's ambition was to democratize art by showcasing it in federal buildings across the country to give greater access to the general public, making fine art part of a daily life. And now we have the 24/7 galleries. Roosevelt himself described this. He said he wanted the art to be painted native, human, eager, and alive. All of it painted by their own kind, in their own country, and painted above things they know about and look at often and have touched and loved. They set aside money for artistic embellishments, kind of, again, sculpture. Most of these works that came out of this we were paid for, but they only were about $600 to do these murals. And these things are huge. They could be 54 inches by 9 feet. And the painter actually got about $10 a square foot for his work, or her work. They were to last, this program lasted from 1943, or till 1943, and it was the only one of these programs that lasted into World War II. Talk a little bit about the selection process. A lot of this was based on competition. They set up 16 regional chairmen who then would organize juries to select the works. They'd publish competitions or invitations to competition. Here's one from the Memphis Appeal, Commercial Appeal in 1939. One from they were doing one in St. Louis. 50 artists showed up for to look at the building because they encouraged the artists to go to the building to see what it was like, visit the towns. Here's another one, the Miami News. They also designed things like the nickel. There was a contest for that. So there were some do's and don'ts. One of the do's was use the American scene style in the paintings. A straightforward portrayal of realism, portraying subjects easily recognizable by ordinary citizens. Champion Midwestern regionalist, Grant Wood, Thomas Hart Benton, John Stewart as exemplars of this American scene. But some of the don'ts were themes of civil unrest, such as labor uprising. They didn't want any of that. Nudity, abstract style, European modernism style. They didn't want any of that. So this really kind of fit into the St. Genevieve art colony with our regionalistic style of payment. So when you had these competitions, what you had to do was first to send in a sketch of what you thought the mural should look like. And it would just be like a pen and ink or a pencil. And it was to a scale of 1 inch to 1 foot. If that was accepted, then you would have to do a painting of this, what the scene was going to look like. It was to scale, black and white of the drawing, and then the last part would be the creation of the installation of the mural. I think we have the whole process of Matt Ziegler on doing one of these. So they have a lot of records of this, and I've tried to get more of them from the National Archives and the GSA, but haven't been as successful as I would have liked. So in all these competitions, there were 175 regional competitions, 15 national competitions, 15,426 artists submitted sketches. Well, there were 40,426 sketches altogether submitted. So the whole universe of what they could select from was 40,000 sketches. And it ended up, there's about 1,371 of these murals that were created. There were about 300 sculptures, because there was also that part of the fine arts. So when you break down 15,400 artists, 40,000 sketches, and you end up with about 1,670 finished pieces. So a little bit of a trivia. A lot of these murals are online. There's some websites you can go to and look at these. A lot of towns in their libraries, you can look them up. I have to admit, I took some of these pictures off of town Facebook pages, but they really demonstrate the beauty of the art that was being created. So 850 artists were selected to create this 1,371 murals. 162 were women, 3 were African American, and only 2 were painted on walls. We'll talk about what some of the other things that they painted on. 1 was painted on slate, which was a local product. So I guess he wanted to do that. This is an example of some of the sculptures. That's a 5-foot by 7-foot cast aluminum on the left. Was done in terracotta, Rock Falls, Illinois. A plaster relief, and another plaster relief. So you don't see a lot of these. Remember, there's only about 300 of these that were created during this program, but it's still nice to see that they looked at all the arts, not just painting, which is like what this art guild does. It's not just about painting. There's lots of other types of art that we create here. Thomas Hart Benton was probably one of the most famous muralists of the time. This one was in the New School for Social Research up in New York City. It was done about 1930, 1931. It's obvious, you can see his style. I mean, it just jumps right out at you. It depicted life in the South, the Midwest, and New York. What a dichotomy. It was installed on the 3rd floor boardroom of the New School in Greenwich Village. And then in 1984 moved to the Equitable Building. And then in 2012 it was donated to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He also had several others that he did during his lifetime. This is the Art of Life in America. You can see that it goes over several walls here. Depicts a number of scenes. This is in the Whitney Museum. And then there is the Indiana murals. This was exhibited first at the World's Fair up in Chicago, and then moved back to Indiana. And again, very typical of his style. It was put in 3 different buildings there. So if you go to, I think it's at one of the universities, you get to go to 3 different art galleries. And those 2 would probably be open 24/7 because they're on a college campus. One of his more controversial ones is in our state capitol. I think it's in the House Lounge. There was a lot of controversy about this. Some said it portrayed Missourians as hicks. There was Africans in it. Benton wasn't afraid of a little controversy, and some of the ones that the Art Colony did also had controversy. But then we kind of come back to St. Genevieve and the St. Genevieve Art Colony. In 1936, Thomas Hart Benton came here as an instructor. And his class that he instructed in was called mural painting. And he looked at mural art as public art. And so that was kind of the beginning of the interest with our art colony. And up on the lower or the far right, you see Joseph Verst and Benton discussing sitting out in the back of the house down on Merchant Street, talking probably about murals and things like that. So that gets us to what I call from easels to walls, the St. Genevieve Art Colony, and their impact on murals in this whole process. The first one that was involved in this was Joe Jones. And Joe Jones he joined the Painters Union at age 14. He was self-taught. He became a director of the art colony in 1936 that had been started by Bernard Peters and Rickley. And he was an instructor in 1937. He was a little controversial because he aligned with the American Workers' Movement and the American Communist Party. He was a major spokesman for the left and the art of the American scene. Actually, the demise of the art colony may have been hastened by the fact that they worked at unionizing the Mississippi Lime Company at the time, and was not too well looked on all around here. But Joe Jones becomes one of the most prolific painters of murals in this program, and I'm going to go through them to show you some of these murals that he did. The way I'm going to show these is I'm going to show you the post office, what it looks like, and where it's located. This one's in Arkansas, and he painted threshing. This is in Magnolia, Arkansas. This was oil on canvas. You'll see a lot of wheat kind of things. That was one of the classes that Benton taught, was on wheat and threshing, so maybe that's why they did that. This was not accepted very early on because the first part of it showed African Americans eating watermelon, and that didn't go over well, and it was rejected. But he got the commission because he got an honorable mention in another competition, so he came back, did this one, which did not include the watermelons. He also did one in Charleston, Missouri. It's an oil on canvas, and again, it's wheat. If you look at the post office, it kind of looks familiar, doesn't it? So you're going to see a lot of post offices that look just like our post office. Then there was husking corn. Got away from the wheat a little bit. This one's in Dexter, Missouri. You don't have to go far to see some of this artwork. It would be a nice little one of your trips someday, because some of them are closer than Dexter and that. And you could do it in the evening, you can do it on a Sunday, Saturday. So this one is an oil on canvas, and it's down in Dexter, Missouri, and he's doing it later in 1941. We're back to kind of doing wheat again. This is in Anthony, Kansas. It's an oil on canvas. I happen to have one of my college friends was from Anthony, Kansas, which is really way down there in southern Kansas. But again, a lot of detail. You can recognize the style in most of these when you see them. Here's another Joe Jones in Seneca, Kansas. Again, the post office starting to look even more like ours on that one. This was an oil on canvas, and it's men and wheat. As I said, wheat becomes a very popular item. The next artist is one that you just featured here, Joseph Paul Verst. And by the way, I have to compliment you on that exhibit. That was fantastic. The layout, the story that it told, and the way you told that story was exceptional. And you should all be very proud of that. Joseph was actually born in Germany. He was a brother to Leon Verst, who owned the Southern Hotel. And there was a kind of an interesting story. I've been working with a lady in Virginia, descended from Leon Verst, and we had always seen that Joseph had painted a painting, even when he was in Germany, of his brother Leon. And we always ask ourselves, where was this painting? And finally, this late Louise Wade in Virginia found a picture of him painting the painting. So that was kind of neat to see, but from what I understand, that during the first exhibit, the painting walked in. So those are kind of the neat things about art. We read about these famous paintings or paintings that have been done, what happened to them, and all of a sudden they show up and it's a eureka moment. I had to tell Louise that the painting's been found. She was thrilled. Joseph liked to paint the Missouri scene, he said, because to me it reflects the true American life, unspoiled and untainted by ruthless modernization. A 1939 Post-Dispatch article said he likes America and is trying to see it straight. So, though he actually was in World War I, so he had a lot of German nationalism, but he came to be an American. So one of his post office's murals is in Vandalia, Missouri. It's 6 foot by 13 foot, for which he gets paid about not very much money. This again is another wheat related picture. The initial concept for this was rejected as the locals thought it showed them stereotyped and backward. Not everybody liked regionalistic art. So this is rural Arkansas, Paris, Arkansas. This is one that did cause a lot of trouble too at first. You finally, I think a lot of times they would show what these paintings were going to be, and the local citizens would get in an uproar. We don't like that. And sometimes they got it changed, sometimes they didn't. But it's hard to get pictures because all of them had the little cutout where the door to the postmaster is. This is another Joe Verst at Bethany, Missouri. Again, you see some Missouri mules. That's very typical of our part of the country. And but that's way up in the northern part of our state. Another artist was Joseph Meert. He was another foreigner like Joseph Verst. He was born in Belgium and came here in 1910. He first came to the art colony here in St. Genevieve in 1936 and became an instructor here in 1937. I like that picture of him. He seems very intense. So let's see some of his paintings. Another one with Karn. This is at Marceline, Missouri, 1940. It's on tempera, a little different than what we've seen before. Contemporary life in Missouri. You can see he goes from the kind of the industrial on the left all the way through the farming on the right and the rural, because we're starting to see this kind of change in America, especially in Missouri. This one's a little bit different in style. It's an oil and tempera, but it's in Spencer, Indiana. So it's again kind of an out-of-state mural painting. It's a little bit different style, but it depicts, I think, rural life. We still had not become very modern in 1939. We were still driving Model Ts around here, or Model A's, and doing farming by horses and sometimes tractors, but it really was not the modern era of farming, and they depicted that life. This one's in Mount Vernon, Missouri. It's another oil on canvas, another pastoral scene. I tried to get some blow-ups to show you the detail of people picking whatever the vegetable was in that garden. So here's one of the ladies that was here in the art colony. She exhibited here very early in the colony in 1932 and was a visiting instructor in 1934. She had been born in Evanston, Illinois. Miriam McKinney Hoffmeister, and she did a wheat mural. This one happens to be in Marshall, Illinois, oil on canvas. And you can see again that the post offices were cookie cutter. They kind of remind me of the first subdivision I lived in Kansas City, or Independence. There was one style of house with 6 different fronts on it. That was, you got the house with one of the 6. This was another one that was somewhat controversial. This is up in Forest Park, Illinois, and the White Fawn was a boat that you could take a ride on in the river near there. But it had some controversies when it was first put up too. So another artist that was here at the Art Colony is a guy named James Barr Turnbull. And I have been searching and searching and searching for a picture of him. It's just, they're just not out there. And I don't know if you ever did a self-portrait or not. There's a guy up in St. Louis that's a Turnbull fan. I've written him, see if he has anything. He was a visiting instructor here for a couple of years, 1936, 1937. And so some of his work that he did included one very close to here down in Jackson, Missouri, loading cattle, which kind of surprised me. I would have thought that would have been more in Kansas City or East St. Louis, but I have to find out if was there a train that went through Jackson at the time, possibly. Their post office looks a lot like ours.
It was like where you grew up. There were 6 plans for the post office.
Yeah. So this is another one that's close. It's called the Lead Belt. This whole area was, or especially just west of here, was the biggest lead mining area in the world for a long time. And so he was over there, and you can see again the dichotomy of the big industrial lead mining on the left to the people in the neighborhood still farming with horses. I think it's a vivid picture of what was happening in America at that time. And a chat dump. And for those of us that know what a chat dump is, climbed to many of those growing up. Probably got some, yeah. They're kind of crazy sledding down one of those. Another artist that taught here was Fred Conway. Most of these people lived in the 70s and 80s, so I mean they were contemporary artists around here. He had taught at the Washington University School of Fine Art and came to the Art Colony back in 35 and 37. There was a comment that he made, and I had told Juanita about this, but I didn't tell her the comment. He said somebody asked him about retirement, and he said, what am I going to do when I retire? Why, I'm going to paint. Since 1916, I've been trying to get a spot in the right place, and I'm going to keep on trying. We all have a little bit of trying to get perfection in our paintings. It's like a lot of things. You got to know when to stop. So this one's in Purcell, Oklahoma. It's called the Roundup. This one was really hard to get a picture of because when most people go in the post office, they're way up on the wall, and you got to shoot up at it. But this is more of a Western theme than what you would expect in Oklahoma, which was the big cattle drives went through there. So then I want to talk about another favorite person here in St. Genevieve, Martell Suzanne Schwig, Langsdorff. She was the daughter of Amy Schweig, and there was a picture we have of Amy and Martell in July 1936. And I just came across this one in the center. This is supposedly Martell and her daughter watching her paint. I thought it was a really neat, and the daughter is holding her paint brushes. Really a neat picture. I don't know how many of you know that she married an atomic physicist named Langsdorff. That's where she came from. And he had worked on the Manhattan Project, and at the end he felt bad about having worked on the atomic bomb. And so he created something called the Doomsday Clock. And Martell designed the Doomsday Clock. So when you see that, it is a thing of Martell that we don't normally think of her as doing. So she did one, in Russell, Kansas, oil on canvas, again with wheat. very, very vivid, and you can see that they're still putting up hay or wheat by hand, putting it in shocks, loading it on a wagon, just as they did. I didn't really want to admit that I did some of this when I was a kid. I wasn't very good at it, but I did it. And no, I'm not 103 years old. She also did one. This was one that was not done on a competition. She had just done so many submissions, and they really liked it, so they just commissioned her this painting in the Recorder of Deeds office. And I got a picture of the Recorder of Deeds office in Washington, D.C. there. And the painting, which again caused controversy because there's an African American in it, and there is a sword. Oh, those bad swords. So, but it eventually did get painted. It's one of the battles from the War of 1812, it looks like. So kind of coming closer to home, one day I lived right next to the post office, and one day I was over there and the postmaster said, "Would you like to see some pictures of building the post office?" And you know me, yes. Because our post offices have been in several places. They've been down where the Show Me Shop was. They've been down where Bill Nagar has his gallery. They've been on the corner where the coffee shop is now on 3rd and Merchant. And in 1939, they built the one next to my house and tore down this lovely, lovely house that looked a lot like mine. But you can see in these paintings, you can see the Yachty building when it's 3 stories rather than 2. Always look in the back of photographs. They're more interesting than the front most of the time. You can see my house and Bill Bovary's house, a beautiful Victorian that was torn down in the 50s to build the Citizens Electric building. Different architectural style. But I really liked it because I could see my house in it. But it has Martel's painting of the La Guillenée. If there's one thing that is unique about St. Genevieve and the mid-Mississippi Valley, it's the tradition of the La Guillenée on New Year's Eve. It's something that goes back, they think, to the Druids into Canada and down here, and it's still practiced at Prairie du Rocher and here, sometimes at old mines, but it is one of the great traditions of St. Genevieve. And she painted it, but she didn't paint it in the style of how La Guillenée runners, they're called guillonnes. The tradition is running the Guillenée for some reason. But she painted it in the 1930s style of the regionalistic art. And I think it's really kind of neat. I love the hats and the dresses, and it's just a marvelous, it's St. Genevieve of the 1940s. And I was so pleased to see this and to take some close-up photographs of it. The last one I'll talk about is a local, Matt Ziegler. I got to know Matt when we moved to town. We moved right next to him. In fact, we bought our house from Matt Ziegler. It's where Treasured Memories is now. And he would let us use the back for a garden, and so we'd get to talk to him. But so he was a local guy. And he wasn't a trained artist from what I can tell, but he worked with these people. And he also became a muralist. But he was during the art colony days, he was a host, cook, provider of art supplies, and a student too. He had a little inn down where the Jean-Baptiste Bossier store is. In 1939, there was a big program called the Treasury Department's 48 States Post Office Mural Competition. Matt submitted designs for post offices in Missouri, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Georgia. He didn't win any of them. He did win, though, one in Flandreau, South Dakota. And it's an oil on canvas, and it's about wheat. The Secretary of the State Historical Society was from Flandreau, South Dakota. It was one of those little serendipity moments in my life that this all came together. This one is over in Chester, Illinois. Faye Davis did it, And Matt would go over and help. And I think Ted Mueller's dad also, if any of you know Ted Mueller, who paints a lot of the churches around here, makes powder horns, great artist. But I think his dad worked on it. But this one's been very controversial, again, because it shows African Americans loading things. And from what I heard, they've covered it up. I hate it when art is covered up. But, so I need to get over there and see if that's really the fact. I hope we never come to the day when we paint over things because we don't like them. I'm a little concerned some of the modern technology. Our revolutionary or colonial militia group, we were in a parade and somebody posted a picture online and they had replaced the picture, the face on one of the people in our group. And that's why original stuff is so important. So, Joe Jones, as I said, was the most prolific, followed by Verst and Merit and Martell. Turnbull had 2 of them, but the other ones just had 1. 7 out of the 20 involved wheat. I guess they all did pretty good listening to Thomas Hart Benton in his wheat class. So finally, I'm near the end. I heard something the other day. I was listening to Senator Roy Blunt talk, and he was getting near the end of his, and he says, finally, and then he paused, and he says, my wife says never to use the word finally because it gives them false hope that you're really done. But I am really done. And so there's certain things that you can read about the St. Genevieve Art Colony. There's Kerr's book. There's the original book by Rogers that the foundation put out. There's various websites on the WPA. It's called WPA Art, but it's really the Treasury Fine Arts program. So I'll entertain any questions that you might have. Or
So,
Scott.
any idea on all the stuff that was on easels or sculptures? Is there any kind of catalog of where it is or what it is?
Supposedly, I think it might be the GSA has some, like I said, I've written them to try to find out all the ones that, especially the WPA art, because we had that one that we don't know who the artist is, it was unsigned.
And so if the public paid for it, does the public own it?
Well, that's kind of what, I don't know what the deal is on that. I mean, it was,
I have something to add to that.
okay.
Our field trip is to the St. Louis Art Museum, and one of the reasons we went, or decided to go now, was they have an exhibit of WPA art. And when you read about how they got it, it was given to them by the Treasury Department. And so there's 58 pieces, but they have some 360 in their collection that are a variety of things, like you talked about, oil paints, watercolors, you name it. And so it seems to me that all of the states got a piece of that art heritage, because I was in Springfield, Illinois, and the State Museum there has a large collection of WPA era. They don't call it WPA art, they call it WPA era.
Right, because it could be one of 3 or 4 different programs.
Right, exactly, from all these programs. And so my understanding is that each of the states, wherever they had a facility that could properly house this art, that it did go to the states. Now, what I was hoping for was that what I would find in St. Louis was St. Louis art. And that wasn't the case, because when I went and looked at what they were showing us, it was from Boston, it was from LA, it was from Chicago, it was from major cities, but it wasn't St. Louis art, which is what I was expecting. I was hoping to see some of our colony artists represented there. And it was the same way when I contacted the curator at the state in Illinois, because I was planning a trip to Springfield. And I thought, oh, I'd like to see if they have a Mary McKinney, if they have something. No, they didn't. It was all art from elsewhere. So it seems as though the whole collection got divvied up in a rather random way. Rather than giving people back the art that was created in their area, they got a sampling of what was created across the country. At least that was what I found out.
With the exception of post office murals.
Exactly.
You can't move on.
You can't move
Well, you can move most of them. Like I said, there were only 2 painted on the walls. Actually, most of them were on canvas or some other medium. Yeah, Pat.
Bob, was it that they painted black people in there or just depicted what they were doing that was controversy?
Could have been some of both. I mean, we were still very, segregationism was still very big back in the 30s. The movement away from that was starting, and it could have been some of both. And you wonder if it would have been a bunch of white guys toting the bales or whatever, if it would have been as...
And what was the thing about the boat?
Yeah, pardon?
And what was the thing about the boat? The light?
I can't remember exactly
Oh,
what that
okay.
was,
Okay.
but, people are always, when you're painting them or photographing them, they're always concerned about, what do I look like? What do I look like? So you got to be careful with that.
I have from my grandmother 2 Benton lithographs that look like they are studies for, one has a tornado in it and one is like a knockdown house and people in that wavy way that he, and I've always wondered how she got those. Where
Well, they might have-
I wonder if they maybe came from the school. Or if
Well,
they-
it could have come from a variety of means. If you want to look at a lot of Benton's sketches, go to the State Historical Society in Columbia. We've probably got one of the best collections. I'm on that board, but so I get to see a lot of this stuff. But they had an exhibit last year of a lot of Benton sketches. He also did all the stuff in Huckleberry Finn. So, and they had a lot of the original sketches. And then they have the Year of Peril paintings, which get me the willies every time I take a look at them, because they're pretty gruesome. So I would encourage you, if you want to do Benton, that's the State Historical Society Art Gallery in Columbia is wonderful.
There was an art professor at SEMO too, when I was a student there 50 years ago, that what might have been a Benton student, but he painted in that style, and the library there has a giant mural that he did that is in a very Benton style.
I'm going to have to take a look at that. We're going to be down there at the end of the month for the opening of
Yes.
Down at the college at the Ozarks too, was quite good.
a bit. He was pretty prolific. He was very prolific. Yes.
Matt Ziegler had a sister who also painted, right?
Was that Sister Kess?
His sister Cassiana.
It's his aunt.
Was it in the house?
It's his aunt.
It's his aunt.
It was his aunt.
She always referred to herself as the Queen of St. Genevieve, that's all I know.
Yeah.
But Bob, she lived, the house she lived in was close to your home?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I spent many a day over there.
And so you talked about that huge quantity of submissions for all of this. I mean, did anyone keep or curate all of those?
I don't think all of them are available. I know, like I said, I think we have one for Matt Ziegler, one of his. That's something we probably need to investigate a little bit further to see if there are databases of what's available, and then try to find out if we can get at least copies of them for St. Genevieve. It would be important because of our art history. I mean, our art history goes way back to John James Audubon, so.
You took me back to being a little girl because I'm from Wyoming, and in Riverton there is a big mural in the post office. And I would love to go to the post office with my mother, and I would look at that every time. And you are right, because there was no wheat. They were shearing sheep in a corral, on that mural. And next time I'm home, I'm going to take a picture of it.
Art's a wonderful thing because it can take you back. I mean, we all have the memories in our mind, sometimes not as clear as what they might have actually been, but when you look at some of the art from the time period, the photographs, I love the photographs of this town that were taken in the 20s, 30s, 1900s. And we continually discover new ones that tell us more and more about the history of St. Genevieve, and some of it's through the paintings that we have. Very good. Well, thank you very much.